A lot of my research deals with dynamic pricing and how consumers respond to prices. And particularly, we look at data from firms, data from nonprofits to understand how we can adjust prices over time, over zones, over products, and make the pricing policies palatable, better for consumers, improve consumer welfare, and also make the firm better. And this is a tricky operational problem. There is a marketing facet to it, which is how people respond to these kind of price changes and price adjustments. And a lot of my research has been trying to understand the interface of these two issues and trying to connect them. We have a couple of papers that I'll talk about. One of the papers, we look at data from a nonprofit enterprise. This is one of the most reputed symphony orchestras in the country. And the industry faces a lot of challenges. It's a nonprofit, so one of our objectives is to make them healthier than they are right now. And since they treat their patrons, that's how they treat us consumers, patrons for them. They are the source of their well-being. And therefore, one of the things that we looked at is how you can start thinking about adjusting prices so that not only you do better revenue-wise, but also help get more consumers, more patrons into the theater. Improve the experience that the consumers have when they go to a concert. So I go to a concert, if it's 80% full, I'm happy. If it's 50% full, even with the same prices, I'm less happy. So how do you improve consumer utility in terms of how they feel, the perception that they have after the concert, and how willing they are to go to the concert repeatedly based on the experience that they have. So this was one of the focus that we had. And we found out one of the things that really mattered was the history of prices. Where you start matters. How you move prices up or down matters. And for which concerts you move down versus which concerts you move up, this matters a lot. Where people are seated, this matters. So we have static pricing problem, we have dynamic pricing problem, we have product variety problem, and all of these are very intricate operational problems that we have to solve together to make it better for the firm. The second problem that we have been looking at is data from a major league sports team in the United States, which is a completely different context if you think about it. Here, revenues matter, popularity matters, profits matter, the players' well-being matters, fans' well-being matters, but there are many, many similarities. Again, the issues that we found was static pricing, where you start. How do you adjust prices? This matters. How do you price games? How do you price games based on opponents? Can you fill the stadium? Can this improve welfare? All of this ends up being very important at the end. So to come back, the collective focus of our problem is to understand how operations, how marketing of pricing matters together, and how we can improve both the firm and the consumer welfare. Couple of things. One of the things that is often discussed in the real world is how consumers respond to prices. There's a lot of controversy about whether people find it favorable, whether people hate it, and whether it's a right practice to do. One of the things that we found out was that firms do want to understand this better, and they already have tools to do this better. And the worry is about perception of the consumers. And what we found from our data is a lot of consumers do understand why firms have to adjust prices, why firms have to increase or decrease prices based on popular concerts or less popular concerts, for example. They don't mind paying slightly higher prices if they had much better experience. So it is always a question about how you can improve the experience from the product, utility from the product, and whether consumers are much better off even with a slight price increase. And that's really something that drives a lot of our results. So we found that interesting that consumers respond positively to price adjustments. At the same time, the worry is there, and we have to do this carefully and calibrate it very well. That's also important. One of the things that makes firms a little bit worried about jumping into dynamic programming or dynamic pricing is the following worry. One, they're always unsure whether consumer response to price adjustments are going to be extreme, and therefore that makes it firms wary of trying various things. What has happened, however, in the recent years is with the help of mobile devices and experimental improvements and things like that, we can do a lot of testing. But it becomes very important in the following sense. We cannot test forever. We have to do a careful study of what kind of policies we can test for. And much of the testing happens in sequence. So one of the things that we found out was a firm that we looked at wanted to change its pricing policy, this team. And they were setting different price policies over time. And as they were changing policies, they had to also understand how consumers were responding to different policies. And we were able to tease out a methodology that can tell them, hey, this policy caused the consumers to come more often. This policy changed how they choose between different seats. The certain policy that we tested for based on the number of days out to the game changed how far ahead of the game or how close to the game they buy tickets. So every policy, we could test out what kind of changes it created in terms of how consumers bought the products. And that helps us to go back and say, if a firm wants to focus on a particular question, let's say, I don't mind my revenues being flat, but I want consumers to buy the same product maybe 5 days ahead. Can we do that? And we can look at policies that we can explore. So this being able to experiment, test policies, and being able to study and calibrate them helps us to understand what kind of behaviors, what kind of changes we can do. So classically, if you think about an operations research problem, we would treat it as an optimization problem. We would just say, hey, here is the demand. Here's the demand curve. Here is the set of products that you have. Let's just go and optimize. This is great. This is challenging. This is mathematically very beautiful. But what we want to also think about is any optimization you do within your firm is going to affect people. It's going to change how people respond, how people behave. And the overwhelming goal, the trajectory of my research focus has been on understanding these are people making decisions. It's important to their lives. It's important to their experience. It's important to their utilities. We have to integrate how they behave, how they change their decisions into our optimization problems. So now we have a more intricate operational problem where we adjust things constantly, but we also wonder how it changes people's decisions, responses. And again, you integrate that back into your optimization problem. This makes the problem challenging, complicated, harder, but much more enjoyable and much more relevant to the community. Yeah. There are many challenges. There's always very different ways how consumers behave. There is always firms that are looking for different data. One of the challenges that we have is we know very, very little about how optimally we can price products, how dynamically we can price products for various settings. It's always challenging. It's always constantly changing. We can think of pricing tickets for a hockey team that's completely different from surge pricing as Uber or Lyft would do. How do consumers respond and call taxis when you change prices? That's a completely different setting from thinking about how do you change shipping prices when you ship from one part of the country to some other part of the country. All of them have the same theoretical flavor, but very different applications. In each of these applications, consumer response is quite diverse, quite different. So the challenge is there to take all this research and theory that we are knowing every minute, every day, and make it more applicable. And that's part of what I want to do, and that's part of what we have been doing at Wharton, along with my marketing colleagues here, great doctoral students. So this is one of the goals I have. Yeah.